All right. Here we are. We are live back on Wisdom. I can't believe that we're up over 100 on Wisdom, right? We've only been doing this for 2 weeks, and we got like 100 people following us on Wisdom. Is that crazy?
That's cool. We're in triple digits. Let's get into what would be quadruple digits soon. That's where we got to go. Maybe after today, we've got such a burning topic today. Maybe we'll get
And even our episode downloads are up. I don't know if you noticed that, but the average episode download is up. So I mean, it's definitely climbing. So people are out there. And if you didn't know what you're listening to right now, you're listening to Nobody Told Me with Mike and Blaine. And this is episode number 31, where we're going to talk about the generational gap today.
Yeah, sounds like it's an interesting one. It's a really good one. And it can be such a benefit if you get like a lot of different viewpoints, but I imagine you can also do it wrong. You can do it the wrong way and probably really struggle too. So.
Well, and what's interesting about that, is that we've all been through it, right? We've all been through it. There isn't one of us that hasn't done that, or been through it in some way or another.
Yeah, so, exactly.
All right. So we always start off with a beer, man. Somebody, we got to start off with a beer. What have you got today?
So I've got, oh man, I saw this can in the liquor store the other day, and it's so cool. So I had to grab it, and I got to do like the full thing here.
That's super cool.
It is Once Upon a Time in Froggywood, double IPA from KCBC, which is Kings County Brewers Collective from Brooklyn, New York. And so I bought it. I got suckered in because I'm like, this is the coolest can. Like, I always recycle cans right away. I might not with this one for a while. This is just so cool. And it turns out it's a really good beer, New England style double IPA. It's awesome. So kudos to them for making not just a really cool can, but like an awesome beer. So that's a great one to check out.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so I strayed out of Texas last week and went Bells from Michigan, but I came right back to San Antonio. I found one from the Busted Sandal Brewery, right? Busted. All right. And it's a 210 ale, and 210 is actually the area code for San Antonio phone number. So it's kind of that. You see kind of the skyline on it. I mean, it's a really cool, like type of logo. It's a blonde ale, so it's kind of easy drinking. But
nice.
Busted Sandals right here in San Antonio. So I went super local this time because I felt guilty going out of state last time.
Yeah, I know you stay so close to home, and it always makes me feel a little guilty for not. I've done some Arizona ones, and when I get up into Canada, I do some Alberta ones, but I stray a lot more than you do. So Brooklyn, New York today, but that's a great spot too. That's a cool place. So.
Well, yeah, what's going to happen is I'm going to have to, right?
You're going to run out. Yeah.
Or I'm going to have to drive a lot farther to try to find something new.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So very cool. So the generational gap, and what we're talking about is, I think most people know it by the names they've given generations.
Yeah.
So you got, everybody knows baby boomers. They know Gen X, and I think I fall in Gen X.
Same here.
What is it? Millennials. Then is there a Y or a Z? What's after?
I think it's a Y. We should look this up beforehand. I don't know. Gen Y, Gen Z. I can't remember.
I think it's Z, right? It goes millennials, then Z, and I'm looking at a chart right now.
Okay.
So it looks like the baby boomers, or there's one even before boomers, that are traditionalists, right? They're like from 1925 to 1945, and they make up 2% of the workforce right now. All right, and then you've got
wow. I didn't even think there'd still be. Okay. Wow.
Isn't that sounds really high, right? 2% of the workforce. But I'm thinking that maybe they're greeters, maybe they're. I think you and I probably will never retire. Just as long as I can talk to somebody, as long as I can give advice, we're probably going to be able to do that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So and then the baby boomers. This says it started from 46 to 64. So that's the baby boomers, and then our generation, 65 to 80, and just so you know. Baby boomers still make up 25% of the workforce, right? They still make up 25% of the workforce. But here's what I think is going to happen, right? And I heard it called the Great Generational Transformation. And I think we're in it right now. Yep. And that's where baby boomers are retiring. So they say as much as 75% of all small businesses will change hands in the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
staggering. And not, you're right. Not that surprising because the baby boom generation was such a big generation. But yeah, that's because I've heard of a lot of boomers exiting the workforce because they're retiring, but I'd never thought of all those businesses selling. That's really interesting.
Yeah, selling or being passed down or gifted in the family, but there will be new owners for about 75% of small businesses in the next 10 years.
Wow.
That's a crazy number, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's it'll be interesting because it'll bring a lot of sort of fresh ideas, a lot of probably tech innovation. It'll be easier. So do people invest in a lot of technology a year or two before they want to pass on a business? Maybe they do. Maybe it adds value to the business, but yeah, fresh ideas coming in probably will help move that along.
Yeah, I would think so, right? I would think so. And you know what? I always had a rule, right? When I'm consulting and working with other businesses or companies, and they're thinking about passing it down to their children. I say, listen, before your child comes to work for you and work in your own business, send them somewhere else for about 5 years. And they always look at me quizzically, right? Like, wow, why would I do that? I said, because here's the thing. If they have a maturity problem, you're forcing them to grow up in front of the people they might have to lead or manage in the near future, right?
Yeah.
So it gives them a chance to mature somewhere else. And not only that, they're going to go somewhere else and see how things are done and come back with fresh ideas and fresh perspective and a new outlook on life. And when they come back, they're more mature, more experienced, and ready to lead, your workforce. I just think it's a better thing for folks to do.
Yeah.
Get out there, get some experience.
I think also that if they go and they have to find their own way, they're probably going to be in a starting position, and it's going to be likely a bit of a tough slog too. So having earned their stripes, but also just experiencing maybe a tough position in that before you're going into the family business, is probably just all a good experience, all really good. And that you bring that back in a lot of different ways to your business.
Yeah, I would think so. So, and here's something that's really interesting is that you probably already know this, but our generation, we're shrinking in the workforce. Shrinking. We're only 33% now of the entire workforce is Generation X.
Bunch of slackers.
Yeah, much slacker. But if you're going to be a little bit realistic about it, I can see on Facebook where I'm having friends with health problems, having friends, moving on in life. Into the afterlife. I mean, so it's one of those things I can see that we're starting to become less and less impactful in the workforce, even though we've moved into more senior positions.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're talking about, because what was it? Did you say 65? 1965 it started, or 1960, somewhere there. So that's getting up into kind of early retirement age for a lot of people. And there's people there's friends of mine I know that have said, I will retire the split second I can. And I'm like, man, I always got to be busy. I'll be doing something forever. But there are people that they just, when they can find that way to retire, they're retiring. And I guess that's the early part of our generation is probably reaching that age.
Well, it's funny to talk about retirement, and I can't even take a 2-week vacation. I go stir crazy. Right. Yeah. I mean, about a week's my max. So I don't know what I'm going to do in retirement.
Well, that's you say you get stir crazy in a 2-week vacation. I'm like, I'm not sure, because it's been so long since I took 2 weeks in a row. I don't even know anymore. I really need to. This summer I'm going to do. I keep saying it every summer. I'm going to do it. Take 2 weeks.
All right. So
it's hard. Right?
If we're declining, that means the next ones up are increasing, and that's the millennials, right? But they're not that much ahead. We're still they're at 35%. We're at 33%. We're still kind of neck and neck, but they're the ones that are starting to take over the world. So the reason I wanted to talk about the generational gap is because there are some difference of opinions and difference of viewpoints on how the world and how business should look in the future that I know, as me coming up, I didn't think people older than I were willing to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. What about you? I mean, so now I'm in that position where I should be having that conversation.
Yeah, I kind of look at it at two sides of the coin. One side is I actually think these generations aren't as different as people think. I don't think people are that different. I think entrepreneurs from one generation to the next are more similar than they are different. They're going to bring some different ideas, of course. But I think when people talk about generations, it makes it sound like it's like the Mars and Venus, like completely different. I don't think they are. I think there's some maybe trends or tendencies, but and I think if people recognize that it isn't, they, entrepreneur is an entrepreneur in a way. Bringing fresh ideas doesn't mean at the core you're not trying to grow, trying to build something really important and try and change the world, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that's funny that you bring that up, because over the weekend I had a conversation, just kind of thinking about this topic, and I had a conversation where I didn't subscribe as much to the differences in those labels. They're there. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But what it came down to is I thought there was a bigger difference in life stage than there was in just birth date. Meaning that, somebody that gets married at 25 has a different experience than somebody that's just coming out of college at 25, single and doing all that. So I'm thinking life stage might have more of an impact on your viewpoint of the workplace or your job or where it should go.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Cause I still remember, like, I don't know how many years ago it was, there was this big, how many news articles came out and said, generation, I don't know if it was millennials or Z, or I can't remember which generation it was, but they want to live in the core of downtown, and the suburbs will die because no one wants to live in the suburbs. And we're just like, oh, yeah, wait till they have some kids. And sure enough, it's like, now, it's like, yeah, of course they're living in apartments when they're 20 years old and they can live above the bar, and, like it, and that's sort of what they can afford. But they made it sound like the suburbs would just be like a dead zone. It's like, nah, you know what? People, I think you're right. Like, you get to a stage of life, there are differences. I get it, with some differences in generation and things, but there's some fundamentals that is like, it's not just a complete generation that's completely opposite of the one before. That's a kind of load of crap.
Yeah. All right. So when I first entered the workforce, I mean, first of all, I was in a kitchen, so that was totally different. There wasn't a lot of technology and stuff then.
Yeah.
But as technology snuck in the late 80s, early 90s, as it started to sneak in, I was quick to jump on it. I'm like, going, I've got, and I want to be part of this. Whatever this is, I need it. Right. So I can remember some of the, one of the first, in my first business, janitorial and service company, staffing company, I hired a sales manager. And it's just because he had so much experience. He was 70 years old, and I hired him at 70.
Yeah.
And the guy was a go-getter, had more energy than anybody else. And I thought, this is a guy that's mature enough to go out there and get a job done, and he's hungry to do it. Right. If you're still looking for a job and going through the application process at 70, you're hungry. You're wanting something to do. Right.
Yeah.
What I couldn't get him to do, though, was to convert into a technology format, use email, use, a spreadsheet. Everything was on paper. Everything was in a book, a notebook. He always had little pieces of paper he was pulling out of his pocket, somewhere. And it was frustrating, because at that point in time, and this was in the early 2000s, I was moving towards everything, even our inventory system, being more technology oriented, and it just freaked him out. Right. And eventually it caused him a lot of stress, and we had to actually put somebody next to him to keep up.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it's I look at it, and I look at it, my parents, how much they can struggle sometimes with technology, because it was so new, sort of late in life. And I look at it and think, how am I going to be 20, 30 years from now? Like, will the new technology be, because I grew up with technology, will it be sort of transferable and move along? Or will there be a certain point where it's like, I'm out, I don't get it. Like, I really struggle with it. I don't know. Like, I'm guessing it'll be such a fundamental change in technology in the next 20 years that it probably will be a bit of a struggle to adapt, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And I think it comes down to, mindset. I would think, because what I read in the past was that, well, like Generation X, we're supposed to be like informal and independent. and flexible, right? But we're also skeptical.
Yeah.
And so that's something I think drives some of the ways that we behave. We're a little bit skeptical, and I'm not quite as formal. I mean, look at me now. I mean, I'm sitting in a hoodie and, and a t-shirt. And at 51 years old, I think that's odd.
I'm sitting there. I actually have a button up today. It was kind of a wool one, but I'm sitting here in shorts and sandals, to be completely honest. Like, you know what? I have a suit, of course, a nice suit in my closet for weddings and funerals. That is it. Like, it is going to have to be one heck of an event for me to show up in a suit. Right. Yeah. I don't know. Is the whole generation like that? It's maybe. Yeah, maybe.
So let's look at it. When do you think in your life you're most shaped by events that happen in your life? I think it's probably in your teens. What do you think?
Like, you mean when, or is it that, like, how much effect events have in your life?
Well, I'm trying to pinpoint, like, there's a point in time when you are no longer your mother and father's child, and you start to gather your own opinion. And I think it's around being a teenager. So events that take place, and I'll say even global events that take place tend to have more of an impact on the person we become later. Right. I mean, for instance, we still talk about, as millennials, I still hear it on TV all the time, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Well, that doesn't have as much impact on, my granddaughter today, it happened. It was a big deal. I remember, I remember it was a thing. The .com boom, when those things happen, today it's just a fact of life. Tech start, no big deal. But the .com boom was something that most of us didn't grasp fast enough.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even the AIDS epidemic was a big cultural, event that shaped perceptions about the world.
Yeah, there was a lot of, well, it's every generation, but there was so much change in technology. Like, man, you know what? Our generation went from analog to digital. But fortunately, it went to analog to digital at a time when we were kind of young enough that we could adapt really quickly to digital. But when you think about that, when you look back on that 100 years from now, that is still going to be a massive fundamental change that, like, of course, I remember, like, of course, analog phones, there was no internet, there was no cell phone. There, like, literally, there's no cell phone, there's nothing. And we've come to the point where communications and everything has changed so dramatically. I don't know, is our generation going to be one of the ones with just the absolute biggest change from start to end of a generation?
Yeah. Currently, I mean, you could always say that for the baby boomers as well. There's almost nothing. I mean, the computer was still taking up the size of a room that nobody had seen or even thought about. I mean, some of the baby boomers saw the initiation of television, right? And so, no, it's going to the moon, and those type of things. So,
but I guess it's those two generations overlap, or even the one before. But it's the generations that have gone from, like you said, like this analog to digital. It wasn't that long ago that there would be someone that would have been born before there was an airplane in the air, right? Like that, so that's a staggering amount of technology in the last 100 years. And that's just groundbreaking how things have changed from generation to generation here.
All right. So would you consider then the millennials probably were the first technology oriented generation?
That were born and grew up in, when does it start again?
It's like 80, 81, right? It's like 1980, I think. We'll say 80.
Okay.
So that's an 80. I mean, you already had video games. You already had, the Commodore, the Apple computers were coming out. So,
but the next generation after that would probably be the one that actually was born when there was the internet. when everything was already digital. And I think that's a different experience where they never even experienced life before cell phones and internet. That's got to be a really like a different,
Yeah, so that's what's that? That's Gen Z, and I don't know what the next one is, if there is a next one, but I think up through 2020 Gen Z, which means like my granddaughters,
yeah,
they'll never know what it was like not to have a video call.
yeah,
Yeah, FaceTime or otherwise, they'll never know what that was like, right?
Yeah, that's bizarre. You know what is, I don't know, what is there a new generation? We should name it today.
We should name it today.
We'll come up with it. I don't know, what did it start 2020?
Yeah,
all right, we'll give it a name.
All right, it may take one or two of these. We'll get her done today, though. So, but look, I can remember back in high school, I was still carrying, people's phone numbers on a little card in my pocket, in a wallet.
There's a friend of mine, and I always say he's like an old soul, but it was not that many years ago, because this is the point where I already had every number, everything in my phone, probably had a BlackBerry or something. And I asked him, hey, I don't remember what the thing was like. Hey, do you have so-and-so's phone number? And he pulled out, he's got a cell phone, but it wasn't a smartphone. And then he pulled out this little 1-inch little piece of rolled up paper that was in his pocket. And he started to unravel it. And then he had this little kind of, after he unfolded it and unrolled it, kind of probably 2-inch by 6-inch piece of paper that was so, worn and that it was almost like material, with phone numbers written on this piece of paper. And I said, dude, you can put that in your phone, right? Like I couldn't even, this is a person that is the same age as me. Any of this little piece of paper. He's probably graduated up today to have a few phone numbers in his phone. And I don't know if he's gone past that. So it's not everybody in a generation is the same, right? Like it's just,
Okay, so that's interesting you say that, right? Because there's it's the law of diffusion of innovation, and it talks about how we adopt technology, right? And I think, it goes from your innovators, the people that, will stand in line and wait for things and want to be first to gather all the new technology and figure it out. Then there's laggards. Laggards are the ones that, won't adopt anything unless they absolutely have to. You have to, that's why there's forced obsolescence in products, is to bring these people up, into the technology world. So I think that, at least in that law, right? All of us can be at any given part of that. Sometimes we're innovators, sometimes we're laggers, sometimes we're just majority, depending on it. Like, living in Texas, it's still oil and gas country. I don't know when I'll convert to an electric vehicle. Not that I'm opposed, it's just I don't really have to.
Yeah. Well, and I'm from Alberta, oil country.
Yeah.
Edmonton Oilers. It is literally oil country. Now the province, I think, has to convert from that, because just to be economically viable, excuse me, at some point you have to convert to that. But I don't know, that Porsche electric car is pretty cool. That could,
dude, I love it. The friends I have with the Teslas and stuff like that, I love them. And eventually I'll get one. I just don't know when that will be. So if you look at, again, that law of diffusion and innovation, you've got innovators and early adopters. And I think that's where electric vehicles are, right? You're not into the early majority yet, right? Where most people are getting one, where all your neighbors, you see them up and down the street. I think we're still early on in the development of that technology. And so I may be an early or late majority. I don't think I'll be a laggard. Like I'm holding on to, gasoline for the rest of my, until there is no more gasoline. I'm not going to be that guy, but I just don't know when I'll adopt.
Well, I think so much of it depends on, for everything. Like there's some things I think I find I'm probably really early adopter on some stuff. Other stuff is a little bit later. And for me, like my current car, I think like I actually, when we bought it, I probably thought this might be the last gas powered car that I own. But I wasn't ready to get it. And this is just a couple of years ago, and I wasn't ready to get an electric yet because I got to do that long commute between Alberta and Arizona. And there's no way you can really pull it off with electric car right now. So when is that point? So but if I was in a different situation, I was living urban area and I was just driving to work and back and forth, I would probably adopt it sooner. So life circumstances, I think, also dictate so much of that, not just sort of my worldview or anything. It's just practicality.
All right. So let's think about it this way then. How about, since you've been the younger person in the workforce and now we're on more of the senior version of the workforce, how have you changed the way you interact with coworkers today versus then, now versus then?
It's, you know what, it's so weird to think about that, because it just felt like for so long, I was always the youngest at everything. Like I was the youngest to do this, youngest to do that. And I always felt like, oh, I'm not getting the respect I want because, because it always felt like I was the youngest in the room doing everything, the youngest. And I started a business really early and all of these things. And I remember, we bought our first house and we were just kids. I don't know why, but we walking through and we couldn't get respect from blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden it's like you wake up one morning, I'm like, how did I end up on the other side? Yeah. Like, how are we hiring people that are half my age? Like, I don't know when that happened. It just wasn't poof.
Yeah.
Somehow I'm not the youngest one anymore. I feel like at times, but I'm not. It's a weird experience, right?
Well, I think it's a natural and probably common feeling because, I was a 19-year-old second lieutenant. And in my first Army unit, there were Vietnam veterans. I got no respect. Absolutely zero. You're like, going, yeah. He goes, I got socks older than you. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I feel it right now that I look back. I don't think about it every day, but if I'm sitting here having this conversation, I'm like going, oh yeah, I can get it now, where people entering the workforce now, they have that same drive, that same need, right? I want to be respected. I want to be thought of as, coming up with smart ideas, or being a hard worker, or contributing in some way or another, and being part of a team. Somehow I lost sight of that. Like you said, there's a blank spot. Like I went from asking for respect to, okay, it's already here. So then what?
Now I'm stuck with it. I have to make the decisions, right? How did that happen? And some industries are built on seniority, and I've seen them. I've never been sort of in that industry, but there's so many that are built on seniority, and it changes the way you view things. I've never been that way, so I'm like, I start a business young, and this is where I'm at, right?
All right, so that's one of the things I've changed about the way I work, or deal with the workforce. Is I used to consider seniority a lot higher. I used to place a lot more importance on it. Than I do now. I reward effort. I reward hard work. I reward
performance.
Performance.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've been here longer, just because you lived here longer doesn't mean that you're a better performer than the 20-year-old coming right out of school. I
totally agree. I just value that performance and energy and everything else that you're contributing, right? And not all industries are like that. I remember one time this is over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and we were doing training materials for the city fire department. So we were doing e-learning materials and video training and all this stuff which was actually kind of fun because we got to do ride-alongs and go up in ladder trucks and in these burning building things and stuff. It was really neat. But I remember walking into the fire hall one day and the chief came out, and he was so used to, and I was young, I was really young, right? And he was so used to this pecking order and bossing people around, and he's yelling at this guy and yelling at that guy. And I don't remember what it was, but I think he actually asked me to grab a broom or something because I was young, right?
Oh yeah.
And I just stopped and looked at him, and the look of my face must have been, okay, yeah, like take your fire hose and shove it up your ass kind of thing. And he stopped dead. And the look at his face was like, he stopped dead. And he's also like, oh, I can't do that. But it gave me some insight because I'm just like, give me a break. Right. But it gave me, it was interesting because he's probably been in that environment for 20 some years, and it's this pecking order. And all of a sudden he's confronted with someone that's like, oh yeah, no, you're not in our culture. You're not in our, but it was that insight into like, holy cow, you guys have a pecking order here. Like, that is weird, right? Like it was such a foreign, I wouldn't have lasted a week in an environment like that, but it was just a little bit of insight into how different professions are, right?
As a state trooper, there's definitely a pecking order. I mean, your academy class, I mean, you carry that all the way through. You know, when did you grade? You know, what class are you? 66. Well, I was 63. You know, so I get vacation days before you. Can we just flip a coin or something? I don't know. All right. So, hey, I want to let folks that are listening know that you can find us on YouTube. If you want to watch what's going on, you can find us on YouTube. We have our one website called mikeandblaine.com, where you can see all the beers that we featured over every episode. You can also interact with us and give us some topics, give us some feedback, you know, on what you want to talk about, what you want to hear, because you've got a combined probably almost 50 years of small business experience just between us. And I'll tell you what, I want to talk next to Blaine, though, about problems, issues. What's difficult about the generational gap in the workforce?
Yeah, it's I think the biggest challenge sometimes is like generations do have a different outlook. And I think that the further along you go, like, you know, even at our age now, we're kind of looking at it, it's like you start to get a little bit locked into place. It's being open-minded enough, I think, to be able to recognize like, hey, there's some really good ideas coming in here. There's some fresh ideas. There's a new energy, and not being too locked in, like from my point of view, not being too locked in my ways, being able to bring that fresh energy in. But on the other side, how do you also coach this new generation coming in and saying like, hey, yeah, you know, we're not that dumb. We've been around for a while, and bridge those gaps and make sure that the best is coming from both sides, not friction coming from both sides, because I think there's risk if you don't handle it well, but there's such a massive benefit if you handle it well.
Yeah. All right. So I mean, there's a I don't know, a perception out there of, we'll say, Gen Z, right? The youngest ones kind of in that workforce right now, that that they have more of a global focus than maybe we did, right? Because I think, you know that book that I read back in, you know, Baylor at the MBA, The World is Flat, that talked about the globalization of economies. That's not a dream or an idea like it was when I read the book.
Yeah.
It's here, right? I mean, it's here.
It's totally here. Yeah.
A person in Scottsdale, Arizona can do business anywhere in the world, virtually, you know, almost.
Yeah. 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 Well, we are like dry runs in 70 some countries. Like, it's a different world, completely different world.
It's been a really cool thing for a guy like me growing up in the Midwest, you know. I mean, now, I mean, heck, my podcast partner is from Canada. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have never happened on the farm in Galesburg. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's one of those things. I'm like going, they're already in tune with, hey, you know, the marketplace here is fun to go to, but we do business anywhere, right?
Yeah.
They already have that mentality, but they're also known for being a little less focused, right? They're a little bit more, you know, project to project. There's a lot of different things that they want to keep tabs on. It's more of the TikTok, Facebook scrolling type mentality than it is project, deep thought or deep work. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's less focused, not more focused like we're used to. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there are differences in the generations to some degree, and it's figuring out, learning about it, figuring out, and how do you get the best out of people? How do you work to those advantages when there are some of those differences, but also maintain they're not quite as different as people think. Maybe on the balance there are to some degree, but it's just not as different as people think. I think like you can find people that from, I think, any generation that can be really focused and drive and everything else. But maybe there's sort of this tendency, because like you said, like they grew up with the social media and things like that. But I think I hear too often the negatives about different generations, and it's like a battle between different generations. And I think it's more productive to look at what are the benefits of the different generations? Where are those strengths, and how do you put them to use for your business and for your team and to change the world, right?
Yeah, so that's where I really became a fan of like the, social styles model, or, those personality tests where, are you a driver, you're an expressive, you're an amiable, analytic? Because when I started building teams, the more diverse the team, the better the team was.
Yeah.
If you too many drivers, too many, A's or whatever in the same group, nothing is done. There's more conflict.
Yeah.
So I thought the more diverse the team was, the less conflict and more effective it was.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Like our team right now it's a full remote team from kind of coast to coast, right? And what you end up with, because we're looking for people that can work really well remotely, you have to have people that are self-starters. You have to have people that are highly driven. You have to have people that have a high give a shit factor. They take responsibility for everything. Then you put a bunch of people in the room like that, and you have to be able to work through those challenges, because it can be that everyone's driving, like everyone's trying to push, right? But you can work through those things. But it does come down to like, how do you get the right mix, but you still have to people that perform. So it's how do you get high performers, but a different mix of personalities and a different mix of, well, they always talk about diversity, and I can see the value of that. I know the value of that, because you have to have different perspectives come in, and you can really benefit from having different ages and different, like just all these different perspectives. But there's also this fundamental where, like, we need people to just execute, drive. So it's tricky. It's tricky to find that balance of bringing in all these different perspectives, but have really effective team for whatever you're doing.
It's funny when you said that, I thought about there's like almost a classic battle that happens when you bring in a young high performer and you partner them with an older, more experienced, still high performer. There's like a weird dueling match that happens at first. You ever notice that? Where,
yeah.
Not a lot of respect given from either side in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I always watch to see what the breakthrough moment is. What is it that happens? And it generally comes down to a point where experience is the best teacher, right? It's usually something where, the older person that has more experience either makes something 3 days shorter, they just said, hey, if we just do this, or I call this person, we can get this project done today.
Yeah.
And that opens the younger person's eyes. They're like, oh yeah, maybe this guy, even though he takes it a little bit more casual, he's not as high strung as I am, or as focused maybe as I am. They can get a lot of things done.
Yeah. It's interesting, because like, as you're talking about this, what I picture is, like I know you watch a lot of sports, right? Like I watch a lot of sports, and you see, like you always hear about that, and it's kind of fun to watch that and see, like, you got these young kind of superstars coming into, and it's any sport, football, hockey, soccer, like everything is all, and then you have the old sort of guard, right? And you always hear about them talking about that, and you talk about like how the younger generations respond to they respond more to like sort of coaching and less to cracking down, and like so there is some generational changes there, and it's interesting to see that, because actually I think you look at that and you can probably take some of that and say, that's how, if I've got a lot of young people coming into my business now, I can sort of benefit from that and go to more of a coaching mentality sort of thing.
Yeah. Excuse me. The best place I saw this play out, think a military deployment. I know I use a lot of military examples because sometimes they just work.
Yeah.
Military deployment, where you have most soldiers, right, in the active duty army are young, right? Most of them are still, 18 to 35, somewhere in there. And they go do their military job every single day. Well, there's this group of National Guardsmen who really only do it once a month, maybe a couple of weeks out of the year. They're just kind of, augmenting the active force. Well, I've seen where National Guard units are deployed alongside active duty units. The average age in the National Guard is a lot higher because they only do it occasionally, or they've already did active duty time and they transition to National Guard time to retire, right? They get their 20 years. So, well, here's what happens when you put those together. You got all these young 20 guys that look good, they feel good, that they can run for days, do 100, million push-ups or whatever it is. But what they can't do is plumb a toilet, run electricity, run electricity, get lights and everything else. So they can't do a lot of the skills that, the National Guard guys do every day. Right. That's what they do in their full-time job, right? They're plumbers or carpenters or electricians. So if you go look at where a National Guard unit lives versus an active duty unit, they live like kings. Just because, hey, we do this, we're not going to sleep on dirt. We're going to build beds and bunk beds, and we're going to build all this stuff to make our lives easier, or better. So I think that's when the young guys, even though they make fun of them because they got beer guts and stuff like this, they're like going, oh, well, but they know how to get all this other stuff done that we like too. So there's a bonding that happens over, it's like covering each other's blind spots.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens is, I'm great at 10 things, but 12 things I'm not. Yeah. If you cover my 2 things, there's a bond that happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where I'm like going, I'm instantly connected to you because now I'm more whole. My life is better. I live in a better barracks or whatever that is. Regardless of how I feel about anything else, you help me in a spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You cover my blind spot.
Yeah. Man, I remember, being young and being able to move, do things without getting sore.
Dude, I get out of bed. I'm going, why does that hurt again? Why did my bottom of my feet hurt when I get out of bed? I don't know. Why does it hurt when I stand up?
Yeah, exactly. It says you're describing them like, man, I remember when I actually could run without being in pain. But it speaks to my lack of.
All right, so
prowess now.
Here's what I'm thinking I learned today. All right. It isn't just a generational gap, right? A product of where you were born. It could be life stages as well, right? It could be married versus single, or urban versus rural. I mean, it could be, or, I'm at retirement, you're at the beginning of your work. I mean, it could be that. It could be just what stage of life are we in? The other thing I liked was that came out of today was looking at it from different perspectives on how can we create a bond and not slow down the growth of a younger person when they're so high performing. You have to give them a voice. You have to give them a way to interact in the workforce without saying, I don't get any respect. Because I think both of you and I both felt that early on was we don't get any respect. Nobody listens to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the at one point you sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit that reward performance, reward engagement, reward that energy over seniority. Like seniority is there's something there. You don't just totally dismiss it, but you have to reward that performance. It can't just be, you have to hang around long enough to earn it.
Well, and I would say this on the seniority is I like to acknowledge it. I consider it in a lot of decisions, but if you're a senior person, you shouldn't rely on that as your sole contributing factor. I've been here longer, right? You still had to perform. You're going to have a considerable amount of weight in everything you do, but you still have to perform. You can't give up and just say, I've been here, so you have to deal with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you close it out.
Me close it out.
Yeah. Let you close it out. I'll put you on the spot.
Once upon a time in Froggywood, you guys can buy us a beer and it would be, we'll promise we'll get you a can that looks this cool and I'll show it on screen. So you guys should be buying us a beer at MikeandBlaine.com.
Yeah. What is referring to is what's funny is we've done 31 episodes and 0 people have clicked that button. I've never had a website where 0 people click the button.
Yeah. They probably looked at everything else, but they will not buy us a beer. And now I think it's turned into a thing. I think people are like, you're not buying a beer. There's no way. Because
it's $5. $5 to buy a beer. I'll even say your name. I'm like going, hey, it was Joe Fiddlehopper about me beer.
I will make a little sign up and we'll dedicate the beer to you. We will name the episode after you.
Oh,
if you buy some beer.
That was a good one. All right. That's a cheap one. That's a cheap one. Cheap sponsorship right there. So, hey, You've been listening to Nobody Told Me with Mike and Blaine, and you can see more of us at mikeandblaine.com. We got merch, we got beer, we got insight. So if you want to talk about something, we've got a whole bunch of stuff lined up in the hopper, but I will bump everything down and put your topic on and we'll discuss that. So
yeah. Unless your topic sucks.
Yeah, if you have a terrible topic.
it's like seniority. We're not going to reward it if it's a dumb topic, but I trust you guys. It'll be good.
All right. Hey, Blaine, another good one, man. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, man. It was fun.